More number system rules. In these number system rules, we're going to look at both adding and multiplying. First, the identity properties. The identity properties. There is a number that you can add to, let's say, 3 and get 3. Think of it. What can you add to 3 to give you 3? The answer is 0. 0 is the additive identity, since a number a plus 0 is the same as 0 plus a. That's a. 0 is the additive identity, since a plus 0 or 0 plus a will give you a. Adding 0 gives you identically what you started with, the a. What can you multiply times 3 to get 3? What number times 3 will give you 3? The answer is 1. 1 is the multiplicative identity, since a times 1 is equal to 1 times a is equal to a. 1 is the multiplicative identity, since a times 1 is 1 times a is a. The word multiplicative sounds exotic. It's very easy to spell, though, if you can spell multiplication. All you do is write multiplication, except on the end, instead of writing the O-N, write V-E. The accent on this word changes to the third syllable, multiplicative. Multiplicative. 1 is the multiplicative identity, since a times 1 or 1 times a will equal a. Adding 0 doesn't change a number. Multiplying by 1 doesn't change a number. That's what the identity properties say. The next pair of properties is a pair of inverse properties. The inverse for addition is the number you can add to 3 and get 0. What do you add to 3 to get 0? You add negative 3. Minus a is the additive inverse or opposite of a. Minus a is the additive inverse or opposite of a, since a plus minus a is the same as minus a plus a, which is 0. Minus a is the additive inverse or opposite of a, since a plus minus a is the same as minus a plus a is equal to 0. Adding a number and its opposite will give you 0. Adding a number and its additive inverse will give you 0. The next property is the multiplicative inverse property. 1 over a is the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal of a, since multiplying a times 1 over a, or the other way around, 1 over a times a, will give you 1. Notice that the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal will do to a factor the same basic thing that adding the opposite will do to a term. When we multiply a number times its reciprocal, we get the identity, 1. Well, a times 1 over a, the a's will cancel. That's what a reciprocal does to a number. A number will cancel its reciprocal and give you 1. 1 over a is the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal of a, since their product will be 1. One more property. It's the multiplication property of 0. 0 does something strange when you multiply by 0. What do you get when you multiply a number times 0? You get 0. A times 0, or 0 times a, will equal 0. The multiplication property of 0 says any number times 0 gives you 0. Let's look at examples of these three rules. Our first example is -8 times 5/3 times 0 times 11y to the 4th power. What answer do we get when we multiply all of this? In multiplication, we multiply straight through from left to right. When we multiply -8 times 5/3, we'll get an answer, -40/3. When we multiply that times 0, we get 0, because by our multiplication property of 0. So this would be 0 so far, and then 0 times the 11y to the 4th would still be 0, and so the answer is 0. Multiplying by an expression where one of the factors is 0 will always turn out to be 0. Now let's do some that are not so simple. Let's take -4x and multiply by -1/4. -4x times -1/4. We can rearrange this so that the numbers sit side by side. -1/4 times -4x. Remember the property we're using here? This is switching the order. The order property is the commutative property. Then we can rearrange things so that the -1/4 is multiplied times the -4. With the x left outside, that means we've changed the grouping. The grouping rule is the associative rule. The associative property allows us to change the grouping. And then 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into -4 one time, and -1 times -1 is 1. Denominator is 1 times 1, which is 1, and so we get 1 times x. This uses the inverse property of multiplication. The inverse of multiplication, because we multiplied a number by its reciprocal. And then 1 times x is just x, because the identity property says that multiplying 1 times any number gives you the number we had to start with. So this is the identity property for multiplication at work. So here are these rules at work, justifying our rearranging by changing order, by changing grouping, justifying our canceling by using the inverse, and then 1 times the x to get just x. Next example, -8/3 y times 15/16. -8/3 y times 15/16. Once again, we'd like to rearrange things so that the numbers are together. And so let's do that. Write 15/16 times -8/3. This time you notice that the numbers are not reciprocals of each other. All we want to do now is do the multiplication, and so we'll multiply as we always do with fractions by doing the reducing first if we choose. Notice that 3 divides 15, giving us 5, and 3 divides 3, giving us 1. 8 divides 16, giving us 2. 8 divides -8, giving us -1. And so 5 times -1 is -5. 2 times 1 is 2. The coefficient of that y is -5/2. And we write -5/2 times y.